Greetings! So today is June 8th, and I've been working on this project for about a month and 8 days, and I'm happy to say that as of yesterday, I wrapped animation. So the speed of production has been a bit faster than I can create these production diaries, but I still want to share my workflow with you guys. So today I'm going to talk about the cutout process. Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved art and making things, but I've never been too great at drawing. So over the years, and especially when it comes to animation, I've kind of taken a different approach to my art creation. So early on in my animation career, I did quite a bit of digital work and also some claymations. I used a mouse to draw my characters, and that seemed to make sense to me. So most of the work I made digitally was actually not that different from what I do with physical paper now. I would cut out, using my mouse, all the shapes and make up the art and then layer it. My brain must be wired in a way to where paper and layering just makes sense to me because that's the approach I take when I'm working with it. So I'll cut out shapes, and then I'll think about my characters in terms of the shapes that make up their bodies. So I've got, the background of the face, and then the eyes go on top, and then I just layer it rather than, starting with the eyes and, drawing that you might do with hand-drawn animation. So it's very different. You have to think about it in a strange kind of way. So often it's the case when I'm working on a project, I actually just straight up start with the paper and lay it all out, and then just sort of paper sketch, so to say, and then kind of work from there and build my characters based on what I discover as I'm working on it. So I don't generally start with sketches in any more than a rough form, like you saw in the storyboards in the last diary. But sometimes, and especially with this project, I did do some art beforehand just to kind of guide and steer the direction of production. So here you'll see that I did some kind of raw watercolor sketches just to give me a general idea of what the scene is going to look like. And this was especially important when dealing with the flying machine, which is kind of the centerpiece of this scene. So last year, as the screenplay was being written and we were revising it, I started doing some kind of test prop making just to see kind of what this stuff was going to look like. And I made an early version of the grasshopper, the flying machine, and just sort of been brainstorming about that. So when it came time to this production, I wanted to fine-tune it and get it exactly the way it needs to be for the final film. And so I did end up sketching because dealing with the machine, and there's a lot of complicated stuff involved with that. So it was actually easier in that case to do some kind of quick sketches. When I work with paper cutouts, I often use an X-Acto blade. I like the precision that it gives me more so than scissors, although I do have a trusty pair of scissors that I also use. But I tend to do detail work and stuff with this because you can really get some nice smooth lines and get really in there into the minuscule little things that need to appear. I also keep a very well-stocked supply of various cardstock separated by color, so whenever I need something, I just have to reach down and grab it. And the cardstock I use, it's a little thicker than construction paper, which works really well for the props I make, because with construction paper it's kind of flimsy and it tends to tear, but cardstock has a thickness to it that gives kind of weight to the puppets and lets them kind of lay flat, which they need to be, so not so many shadows are cast and stuff like that. And you can just get it at any craft store in the, I guess, scrapbooking section, so I'm there a lot, getting massive amounts of paper. And yeah, it's an interesting thing because I tend to need very specific colors of paper, so I have to kind of keep a log to know which store sells, the skin tone of the Inventor, because that store is different from the one that sells the skin tone for Amira, the other character. So I'm jumping around to different stores trying to remember where I found the paper I needed. I remember once when I was working on Path of Blood, the store that I got the skin tone for the main character in decided to discontinue that paper, and so I was in a panic. I was driving to all the neighboring stores in pretty much like a 50-mile radius of the city I live in, just trying to find any last bits of this color that they had. Luckily I found something that worked from a different store. But it's tricky like that. You always have to be you know, prepared and buy a bulk supply if you know you're going to need it. But yeah, cardstock's the way to go. And I glue all my stuff together with a very special tool. It's a glue stick, but it is not just any glue stick. This is the best glue stick. I have to go to a specialty art store in town to find it. Only one place sells it. It's called a Uhu stick. It's made in Germany, and it's the best glue that I can find for what I need it for. I'll show you. Now, it's hard to describe why it works so well. It's something in the texture. It dries quick, but not quick enough to where you can't fix and tweak as you work. It has a nice way of sticking to itself so that if you accidentally apply it somewhere you don't want, you can rub your finger over the area until it collects, and it won't leave an unpleasant residue that might become a glaring issue once lights hit the props. Another really important tool that I use is sticky tack. This is the kind of stuff that you'd see in grade school with, you know, teachers putting posters on the wall. I think that's when I first encountered it as a kid. I remember taking it off and playing with it, but it's super useful. I use it to hold together the joints of the puppets. This way, as I'm animating the characters, all their pieces aren't just drifting apart every time I touch them. Now, this stuff can be kind of fickle. Over time it tends to dry, and then that makes it kind of difficult to move the joints, and so you have to be concerned about that. Also, one really annoying thing is that it will stain the paper if you leave it on there too long, and that's a big problem because it'll bleed through and be very noticeable. And so often what I do is I hold off on putting the joints together until I'm ready to animate, and then once I'm done, I disassemble it and take it apart. Because it solves that problem, but it's a little bit of a pain. One solution I've found is if you double layer the paper, then you're not going to have to worry about that, and then you can leave it on, but it's still going to harden and be hard to move if you let it sit exposed, I guess, to oxygen for too long. Other than these few tools, other things I've used are rulers. You know, I've got a little selection of rulers over here that I draw from just to get straight lines and things like that. And hole punches are useful occasionally, although I tend to just use the scissors and X-Acto knives. I find it just as fast to do a quick circle as it is to go find the hole punch and punch it. But it's really not many tools you need besides the cutting mat, and then you can get started on making these props. And I find it really, really fun, and it's kind of relaxing. Sometimes I'm able to watch a movie as I bust out a bunch of trees or something. It can get monotonous, so it's kind of my zen part of the animation process, except for the other part that is perhaps even more zen. That is the actual animation. So we're going to talk about that next time. So join me then. Bye.